Hello, I'm ShieldWall100 and welcome back to my channel. It's another historical game report today, and instead of doing Ancients as was the last historical game, I'm actually going to do World War II this time. I've managed to liberate my miniatures after lockdown, and I've been really looking forward to playing a little bit of Chain of Command by the TooFatLardies there. This is a really good rule set. I'm looking forward to it for a while, and I can just about run it solo on a small scale, I think, just to get an idea as to how the game works. I'm kind of getting back into it, get the old muscle memory of the game going again. But yes, this is going to be World War II. We've got a small scratch platoon of Germans. This is set during Operation Market Garden. They are counter-attacking the perimeter of the 82nd US Airborne, which has a fairly understrength garrison along this road here, this small collection of buildings. I wouldn't even go so far to say it's a village in the Netherlands at this time, but yes, so that should be a bit of fun. The objective is the crossroads you can see at the top middle of your screen there, and yeah, I won't be going through the rules blow for blow because that'd be kind of boring. If you want to check out how the rules actually work, the TooFatLardies themselves have a YouTube channel with a really good description as to how each phase of the rules goes. I will go into it a little bit just to say what's happening and what's going on and explain how the turn sequence works, for example, but I'm not going to go into the minutiae at all, really. Just going to either assume that you know the rules or just along for the ride, perhaps, if you just want to see, a fairly fast flowing game. This is my favourite set of rules for World War II. It hits just the right scale for me, platoon on platoon level combat, and yeah, it's just nice and simple, and I think it plays quite historically accurately as well. And okay, let's get on. I'll show you which models, or basically which figures comprise each of the two opposing forces today. Okay, here's the US Airborne contingent for today. These are the defenders of the crossroads over there, and yeah, I'll go through each part bit by bit just to show you what we've got here. The US Airborne, of course, have a different platoon structure to the other American platoons that you can get. So here we go. First of all, you end up with your Platoon Headquarters, which is these four guys up here. We have a senior leader and another senior leader who's like subordinate but still a senior leader. We'll come to those as the game progresses, and a team of bazooka and a loader. Okay, so it's one team consisting of two blokes with a bazooka. Okay, that's the anti-tank element of the entire platoon, unfortunately for them. We've got two other squads here. So one thing to bear in mind in Chain of Command, there is a distinct but very important line between squads and teams. So squads are basically comprised of teams. So for example, take this squad here, which is everything in this shot right now. You've got a junior leader with his submachine gun, a team comprised of 8 paratroopers with their Garand rifles, which is what officially they're armed with, even if there's a few carbines in here, and they're all counted as Garand's rifles for now, and a light machine gun team here. Okay, belt-fed light machine gun comprising of 3 models, so one team, a second team, and a junior leader to hold them together comprises the squad overall. You duplicate that again for squad number 2, so rifle team, light machine gun team, junior leader, okay, with a submachine gun, and right. So that's like the meat of the platoon. Then you have the auxiliary teams which get added on. Well, there's a 4-man mortar team, 60mm mortar. That's kind of standard for platoons, to be perfectly honest. So I popped it in, and we also have a medium machine gun, belt-fed team as well. So yes, so like a light machine gun team here, these are also teams. They do not activate as squads, they activate as individual teams. You have to bear that in mind. And yes, there's no junior leader in the medium machine gun or the mortar team here, or for that matter, there's no junior leader attached to the bazooka team. So yeah, that will affect how they activate, how they engage with other parts of their own platoon. Okay, yes, but yeah, that's a lot of firepower just there. In fact, there's a whole lot of firepower considering the relatively small model count for the US Airborne altogether. And of course, these are elite troops as the rules go. That gives them a whole bunch of benefits, to be perfectly honest. It gives them extra command dice, and it just makes them it intrinsically makes them harder to shoot at, because they're just more likely to be able to make use of terrain and whatnot. Rolling to hit in this game is actually more based upon the opponent's morale grade rather than it is their actual size or more to the point, how accurate the people shooting are. Accuracy is kind of like a given in this game. It's more to do with the effectiveness is more to do with what you're actually shooting at and how accustomed they are to being shot at, etc, etc. Anyway, we'll carry on and we'll see how that happens as the game progresses. I'm going to get out the Germans and show you what their platoon comprises of as they attack this position. The German platoon is representing a regular Heer unit, so this is regular German army, not Waffen SS or anything silly like that. These are regular troops who are undergoing basically rest and refit when the Americans rudely interrupted them by landing nearby. They've been cobbled together, well, as soon as they could, and given whatever reinforcements they could blag basically at the time before they were sent forwards to try and probe and just see how solid this American perimeter actually is. Yes, it's like a half a probe, half a raid, half an all-out assault, I suppose, if it goes really well. But yes, here we are. So these guys are represented as regular, not not elite, and definitely not green. These guys have seen combat for the most part, but some of them are undergoing like rest and refit, like I said, and they're not particularly pleased about having to fight again so quickly either. But hey, them's the breaks in war. Okay, the actual platoon components represented by the command section here, Platoon HQ. They only have one senior leader as opposed to the Americans two. By now, German NCOs, etc., are slightly harder to find, so they don't automatically come with two. So in this case, they've only got the one. Accompanying them, though, is an anti-tank. Tiny anti-tank team of a Panzer Schreck and his friend. He probably won't get much use today, given the unlikelihood that Americans will be bringing armour with them. But hey, they're there because of completeness. Also, today they managed to scrounge up a 5 centimetre, about to say a 50 centimetre mortar. That would have been quite the achievement. No, a 5 centimetre mortar as well, and 2 crew for it as a team, not a squad, a team. Remember that. The main meat part of the platoon, shall we say, is these 3 infantry squads here, each one comprised of a junior leader and 2 teams, 1 rifle team and 1 light machine gun team. Notice how similar that is to the American platoons, squads. Sorry, that is that's interesting enough in its own right. But yeah, the German rifle teams only have 6 men as opposed to the Americans 2, so they have on a squad for squad basis, a slight deficiency in manpower. But there are 3 of these squads 1 to 3, each consisting, as remember I said, of 1 junior leader, a light machine gun team of 3 men, and a rifleman team of 6 men. Okay, so yes, that's that. And of course, what you must have noticed is the Stug. Yep, here it is. A lovely Stug has joined them. That's short for Sturmgeschütz, or something, assault gun, basically, in English. And yes, it's as close as they could get to a tank that would join them. Quite often, actually, Stugs would apparently end up accompanying the infantry assaults, because they were generally more amenable to helping out when tank crews might think that they deserved a rest or something. That's what I heard. I'm not saying that that's definitely the case, all you history people, but just like that. But I always quite liked assault guns as a concept and a bit of fun, and I figured it would be a bit more fun to have one along today, as opposed to bringing a Tiger along or something, which would have been probably harder to get hold of at short notice. Much more likely that an assault gun would be so to speak, hanging around or just waiting in the depot or something, and their crews would be like, yep, okay, will come out and help out today. Anyway, that's my headcanon. It's here now, and that's what's going to be coming. Basically, when you don't have armour of your own, such as the Americans defending this position do not, a piece of armour is a piece of armour, to be perfectly honest, and it's hard enough to deal with in its own right. I find that, you know, classes of tank and whatnot really seem to start really mattering when you actually end up fighting when they end up fighting against each other. So we'll see how it goes today, and yeah, we'll probably see if I regret my choices later on. Right, we're going to move on now to start the game. It's not a conventional deployment in chain of command. We don't start with all of our models out on the board like you would see in, well, Batman or most conventional war games for that matter, but I'll tell you that as we go. What I'm going to do is actually go and run a whole sort of like a tactical reconnaissance sort of mini game myself, and that will determine the actual deployment zones for both sides and where they put what's called their jump off points, which is basically like individual points around the board which they will be deploying their troops from as the game progresses, and I'll do that off camera and report back in just a second. Okay, as I said, I've now completed the little reconnaissance phase, so to speak, to determine deployment zones and where people are coming on. So this is how the board's going to look at the commencement of turn number 1. Right, so let's just recap where the German jump-off points are. So this is where they're going to be deploying their infantry from as the game progresses. Here's one just here, behind this hill. The other hill here has one. And in the woods over here, fairly deep. Okay, so infantry for regular troops, which is what this German platoon is, can deploy within 6 inches of these jump off points, and what they basically represent is positions which have been sort of semi-scouted out beforehand, which the platoon command can be fairly sure they can get their troops to without, you know, bringing them into harm's way. So if you imagine most of the platoon is actually currently off board in like an area where they'll be deploying from, they'll get ordered as the time progresses on to deploy to certain areas, you know, attack from this position, attack from that position, hold this area, that kind of thing. And that means that they can basically get there. They've got routes established where they can reach these points without being really harassed, so to speak. Okay, and so that's where these jump off points come from. Okay, these represent those safe areas. These actual points can be overrun by opponents, so there is a penalty for putting them way too close to your enemies. Basically, it's a risk, but there's also a reward, because you can potentially deploy right next to your opponent, you know, really in an opportunistic position to get the edge over your opponent. But if your opponent counterattacks and storms them, then you take a whole bunch of like force morale damage, which is what ultimately determines when you finish playing. Okay, yes, the Germans for this particular game rolled up a 9 amount of force morale points, which is kind of average. As that drops down, they'll start to suffer problems with their chain of command and their command dice, etc., etc. Eventually, the wheels will fall off and they'll be unable to activate at all, forcing them to withdraw from the game and thus lose. But that's if they lose. As they accrue damage, that will happen. But it will happen to the Americans too. Speaking of which, let's see where the Americans put their jump-off points. Bearing in mind they're protecting this crossroads, particularly. Okay, their jump-off points are here behind this building here, this little hay hut, I think is what it is. There's one further forwards amongst the small sort of like hedged off field sort of area, and there's one just there behind the house with the hayloft. Okay, so they can also treat the crossroads as one as well. In order to win this scenario, the Germans have to force the Americans to withdraw by breaking them down through damaging their troops, killing their leaders, overrunning their jump-off points or whatever. They also have to storm the objective as well, so have models there. Okay, that's basically it. The Americans win by stopping that from happening, basically driving the Germans off. Nice and simple. Okay, we're going to get on to turn number 1 now. The Germans will be going first. Interestingly, the actual definition of turn in chain of command is a little bit more elastic than most other war games, but it's going to be their first round of command dice, and I'll take you through what they're going to do. Okay, this should be fun.
3, 2, 1, go! 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 3, 2, 1, go
Germans have just taken their first command roll, and here it is. They roll 5 dice, being a regular unit. Elite troops would get 6 dice, command dice, shall I say, whereas green troops would get 4. But almost all units in this game are sort of like regulars, is what I usually find. But we're using elites today for the Americans, but never mind. 5 dice rolled, and here were their results, as I keep focusing in on. Right, I'll break down what each of these does. Right, each of these represents a thing that you can activate with in your turn, so you won't get to use your entire platoon necessarily. You have to roll these dice and then assign them to various squads, teams, or leaders, etc. So, right, let's start with the lowest and work up. So, if you roll a 1, that you can use that to activate or deploy a team from your reserves to the board, or activate one that's already on the board. So, teams, don't forget, those like the individual machine gun teams, the mortars, the anti-tank gun, the anti-tank rifles and things like that. They can also be components of squads. So if you remember, the squads were comprised of several teams. You can use the 1 to activate one of those teams. Don't have any 1s, so can't do that. So no teams were able to be deployed by the Germans this turn. The 2s, however, activate or deploy squads. And so what the Germans did was they used this 2 to deploy a squad of one of their 3 infantry squads in whole, including its junior leader, just over here next to this jump off point. Okay, straightforward. They can't move once they do that, but they can shoot if they had anything to shoot at. Nothing to shoot at, of course. No Americans visible yet, so they just pop themselves down within 6 inches of this jump off point. The next die you can see there is they had a couple of 3s there, used one of those. Now 3s activate what's called junior leaders. Now if you remember, I pointed out that all of the infantry squads have a junior leader as opposed to a senior leader, which is what the platoon commanders are. So with this 3, they actually used the junior leader who accompanied this squad to deploy, and he can use them to deploy his squad. He can also then use his various points that he has. He has like command initiative points, 2 of them in fact. He can use them to do things like remove shock, do bits and pieces. He can reassign members between the teams in his squad. Order them to throw grenades and stuff like that. Depends what he wants to do. But basically, he used them to he just used his to deploy his squad. So basically, Germans have deployed 2 squads near to this jump-off point, obviously making use of the woodland here. You can see 6 inches through this woodland, and it counts as light cover. There you go. It's the only real movement impediment is that troops can't move really fast through it. Okay, they can move at slow tactical paces or standard rates, but they can't go full out. Okay, which is in the rules, and I'm not going to bother you with the minutiae of that now. But yeah, so there you go. So 2 of the 3 German squads have been deployed in like a strong hook through the woods. So maybe a bit of a statement of intent there from the Germans. They're keeping 1 squad back though for surprises. Right, the next dice, as you can see, is a 3. If we're carrying on up the scale, the 3 is another junior leader. Now the actual stug here has a junior leader on board commanding it. Okay, so used the 3 there to activate that junior leader, and the stug then deployed onto the board. It actually comes on back here because it's a vehicle, can't deploy next to the jump off point, but as it was, he ordered the driver to move flat out and managed to get just before the crest of the hill. So he's not quite in sight. He certainly not in a firing position yet, but he's getting there. And that was a flat out move. It's a dice roll. You don't know exactly how far you're going to be going. Moving flat out does prevent them from firing all of their other weapons and stuff, but yeah, they haven't gone into shootout yet anyway. Right, returning to the dice, the 4 here, 4s activate senior leaders. Now remember, the Germans only have 1 senior leader. They could use this 4 to deploy him onto the board, or go next to any of the existing jump off points. Not gonna happen, I'm afraid, because taking your only senior leader from deployment onto the board at this point would mean it would be a lot harder to bring on, be just a bit more unpredictable to bring on the remainder of the platoon. He'd get his benefits of being able to use his command bonuses, whatnot, on the board, but he really needs himself to be off the board directing things from there. So unfortunately, this 4 is not being used this turn, so it joins the use pile. And finally, 5s, this 5 here, this is a chain of command point. What happens is you see these big fat dice over here. These are your chain of command dice. You use every 5 you roll on your command dice, you add a pip to that. So you see that's on a 1 there because they got 1, 5. If you get up to 6, so it goes round to 2, 3, etc. If it gets to 6, you get a chain of command point, which you can then use for a variety of all sorts of fun and game shenanigans. We'll get to that as we come on, but basically the more 5s you roll, the less things you're activating on the board, but you're building up this like supply of chain of command points and chain of command dice, more to the point, and they can have benefits later on. No 6s were rolled. I'll come to what 6s do as and when I roll one. The general rule is if you only roll 1, nothing happens. If you roll 2 or more, you get to go again. Okay, that's the basic thing, but no 6s rolled this time, so yeah, that's it. So that's the Germans. This is their first activation. So this is a bit of a long one, obviously, because I was explaining to you what the dice do and stuff. I won't need to really do that again, really in detail. And yeah, but as you can see, they've started moving on to the board. The armor's taking up a position in the open area, so as to have a fairly good view overlooking the battlefield. Meanwhile, a strong force of German infantry is moving through the woods. Incidentally, there's no template weapons in this game, you'll be happy to hear, so I can be a little bit cavalier with how closely I space the Germans out. You could be a lot more realistic and spread out than that, but thankfully it's not really an issue in this game, and I've got filming to worry about, so I've got a time limit, etc, etc. Okay, we're now going to move on to the Americans. Okay, right, the first US activation has gone, their first command roll, shall we say, and here it is. So as you can see, different to what the Germans had, and they had 6 dice, don't forget, so because they're an elite platoon. So a couple of 1s there. The first one, shall we say, activated as a team. So what they did was they deployed their 60mm mortar next to this deployment zone. Basically, for the elite platoons, they can deploy up to 9 inches away from their own jump-off points. There's one around there, and yeah, so that gives them a lot more latitude as to what they can do with their troops, which is pretty representative, I think. Yeah, so but this mortar team deployed here, remember that they can fire in the turn that they deploy, because they're considered to have kind of had time to set up, etc, anyway, in advance. Yeah, so that's what they did. They opened fire and they shot at the nearest German squad in the woods there. Now, this size mortar, 60 centimeters, sorry, not 60 millimeters, not 50. Keep saying 50. Jeez, it's a 60mm mortar. It has 3 dice. Okay, and to determine whether or not it's shooting at close range or effective range, for mortars, it's as simple as can you see the person you're shooting at, and of course they cannot. There's lots of woods. There's a couple of buildings, 2 hedges. Yeah, it was a lot. So yeah, from here they couldn't see, so it counted as being at effective range, which is as long as you can get in this. There's close and effective range, for bands. So against regular infantry in effective range, it's 5s or 6s to hit. They rolled 3 dice because that's how many dice they get allotted for this size of mortar. They hit twice out of that, and just to convert that, you work out what level of cover the opponent's in. It would normally be light cover, but mortars reduce that by 1, so they're counted as being in the open. They rolled the dice, and it translated into 1 point of shock being placed down. Now, shock is that tiddlywink there, and shock is basically the uneasy feeling you get when you're being shot at. You probably recognise it, but yeah, it accrues on units. It could be, instead of kills, it doesn't represent actual damage. It just represents them noticing mortars landing nearby, and it basically has a detrimental effect on the unit's firing, its movement, and that shock can be removed as the game goes on, usually by the effective leaders and stuff. So okay, so the mortar deployed and put down a warning shot, which landed too near to this squad for comfort, and it dealt 1 point of shock. Okay, as units get lots and lots and lots of shock, they can eventually go pinned or eventually break altogether. Okay, it determines how many models they've got left and how much shock they've accrued. Okay, that's as simple as that. So that's the first one they used. The 2 was used to deploy this squad 9 inches away from this jump off point, so some of them have scrambled into cover behind the hedge. The machine gun team notably has not yet, but they probably will be in future activations, probably looking to intercept and flank those Germans over there. That was their deployment. They could shoot if they had anything to shoot at, but they don't. The other one was not used in the end. It's a team. They could have used to deploy a component of another squad, or maybe it was tempting to bring on the bazooka team now that the threat of the tank, the Stug has emerged. But they wanted to hold it back. Showing your hand altogether too soon in this game has bitten me on the bum before, I seem to remember. So I'm leaving that one. They'll hopefully get a one later on, so they can deploy the bazookas or the medium machine gun later on in a position where it's more needed, rather than telling the Germans where it is. Okay, right. So moving on, the 2 5s converted into 2 chain of command points, as you can see there. Lovely. And the 6 on its own does nothing, unfortunately. So that is a wasted die this time for the Americans, but they got some stuff out. And yeah, it's early days yet, so we're going to move back now to the German activation. Bear in mind, this is still turn 1. The turn only changes over at certain points which are reached, okay? And I'll let you know when those happen, but for the time being we're still in turn 1 technically. It's just the German second activation, their second lot of command dice. German second command roll there. Okay, so this is a bit more different from what we're used to. 2 5s there, now translate into 2 more chain of command points, so they're up to 3 running total now. The 2 6s there, what that means is that instead, it won't move anything right now, but the Germans will actually, instead of having to hand over control to the Americans now, they'll be rolling their command dice again after they concluded their moves now. So all we've got to do now is this number 3, sorry, and that's a junior leader, if you recall, and what they did was to activate the junior leader in control of the foremost squad on their turn. He gets 2 command initiative points. He used one of those 2 to remove the sole point of shock the mortar just put on, so he's geeing his his squad members up to tell them what they're fighting for and everything like that. And then he activated them all to move forward tactically. What that means is they can choose to go 1 dice inches forwards, and then they drop to cover. Basically, they make use of the most cover they can, and they put down this little marker that says tactical there. And yes, it basically means that they treat their cover as being one class harder than it would otherwise be. So the woods are normally light cover whilst they're in it. In tactical, they count as being in hard cover. They do have to not. That means they don't get to fire this round. Sorry, but yeah, that's it's better than. Since they're getting mortars and things, and there's an American squad just there, they're going tactical. Okay, right, that concludes this round of dice for the Germans, but they're going to go again in just a second. German second command roll in a row, and that's what they got. Should really have moved them together a bit for better cinematographer, but never mind. Okay, the 5 again puts them on 4 chain of command points. The 4 again they're not going to use. The 6 on its own does nothing. The 1 and the 3 though they did use. First of all, they used a 3 to activate the junior leader on the Stug here. It just moved forward 1 dice, so it moved forward slowly just to the top of the hill there, and then it fired HE. The gunner activated next and fired high explosive into the American squad in front of them and did nothing. It missed. It was unfortunately a very hasty shot there from the gunner and overshot probably by some distance. But yes, way to announce your presence. Yes, unfortunately, yes. He got 5 dice basically, which is the high explosive rating for this particular vehicle, and again, it doesn't matter actually what class of models you're shooting at, whether elite or green or whatever. It's always forced to hit with each of those dice, and he managed to roll not a single 4 or more on any of those 5 dice. So boo for him, I suppose. But early days. Finally, the 1 was used to deploy the small mortar team there. When you're assaulting positions, mortars are quite useful, I find. And what they did was, it's a 50mm mortar team, and they popped themselves down actually on top of the hill, which is probably rash, but they're hoping the Americans will have way too many other targets to deal with, that they'll be noticed anyway. A small 2-man team right at the back, and which means they were in sight of this American squad here, which meant that they could fire at what was called, in mortar terms, close range, which is what you kind of need against elites. Gave them 2 dice to hit with, and they managed to actually kill one of the Americans, which is quite lucky for them, very unlucky for the Americans. So yes, first blood to the Germans, and yes, so unfortunately a GI has bought the dust. So okay, that concludes these 2 activations for the Germans. We're going to move back to the Americans now and see what they roll. the US Airborne's next activation. There you are. Right, the 6 does nothing, the 5 just accrues a 3rd chain of command point, so they're gone now. Right, this is a mixed bag of 1s and 2s again. I'll show you what they did. So first of all, they used one of the 2s to activate the squad here. Yeah, so there they are. What they did, they moved up with 1 dice and were still able to fire at half effect. Instead of going tactical, they decided to do that because they're Americans and they want to shoot. Yeah. No, to be honest, they wanted to get the drop on these guys. They could have gone tactical, but getting these first shots in sometimes really pays dividends, especially when you've got like Garans and this sort of stuff. Anyway, they moved up and fired at half effect altogether. It was actually quite the devastating barrage of fire. They hit with all but 1 of their dice, but unfortunately the Germans, being in hard cover effectively, reduced that down to just a single point of shock, and there's that tiddlywink there. So yeah, that was a good decision to go tactical on the Germans' part. It certainly saved them a lot more damage, and yeah, they'll be able to return fire in their next phase perhaps. The next thing that came out was they used the 1 to activate a team. They could have gone with the mortar team at the back, but they activated this bazooka team instead to bring it onto the board 9 inches away, so right up there, and they opened fire immediately on the Stug. Right, basically to fire vehicles, it's a simple 2 dice roll added together. You need to beat a certain score, and there's modifiers for if the tank had moved, if they'd moved, not that they can shoot if they move, but you know, if the firer moves, all sorts of things. The fact that the Stug has a low profile as opposed to having a big old turret on top of it factored in to give them a negative to hit, but basically the range and everything, all that basically comes together. They needed a 7 or more on 2 dice to hit. They managed to do that and start with a double 6, which meant they actually got a weak spot, so gave them an extra bonus on their damage roll basically. When all was said and done, after the damage roll was done, you can look up how this works online. I'm sure there's tutorials on YouTube, etc. They managed to do a single point of shock. It wasn't a great attack roll basically they got after that. A single point of shock, and the actual vehicle commander was surprised. So obviously these guys suddenly emerging from the bushes took him aback quite a lot, and the resounding clang as a bazooka round deflected off their sloped armour has scared him, which means they get a point of shock, which will adversely affect them in much the same way it would adversely affect infantry. And also they cannot activate in the next set of command dice that the Germans get as the commander regathers his wits. Muffled cries of "Gotten Himmel" coming from inside the tank as the smoke clears. Unfortunately for the bazooka team, they did not destroy their target. They would have loved that, but yeah, they managed to certainly give them a scare, and they can give it another go next turn perhaps. Well, next activation. Right, moving on, there's these last 2 2s here. Now, something I haven't mentioned so far is that if you don't want to use these, you can actually add the dice together to get a result of up to 4. So these 2 2s were added together to make a singular 4, and that means that they could bring on one of their senior commanders. Because the Americans got 2 senior commanders in their platoon, it gives them a little bit more latitude to bring one on and still have the other guy guiding the reinforcements as the game progresses. So they brought on their second in command. He is a senior commander. He'll be able to use his command points to activate nearby squads or teams in the future, just maybe and help and possibly remove some shock as well. So that's him there, and that concludes the American activation. We're going to move back to the Germans now. Okay, there's the German command roll. So again, the 5 does nothing. The 5 just accrues an extra point of chain of command on their chain of command dice, so they're getting close to having their first whole point. The 4 they're not using. The first 2 they used to activate the furthermost squad, over here, and they've used them just to roll 2 dice to move up. They can't shoot if they do that. They couldn't move the 3 dice all out because they're inside the light woodland still, so they're just moving there. They're almost at the edge of the woodland there, and yeah, they're continuing their sweep around. The next 2 was used to activate this squad here, with the one that went tactical and got shot at. They opened fire back at the Americans. This is very close range, incidentally. Wasn't expecting that altogether when I set the board up, but I should really have foreseen it. Yeah, the singular point shock doesn't actually have an adverse effect, just for 1 point. Then so they lose a 1 dice worth of firepower for every 2 shock they have. Right, but they open fire back on the Americans. Americans elites is difficult to shoot even at close range, so you only hit on 5s or 6s basically. And so yeah, with the barrage of dice they got though, because you get 8 dice for a light machine gun and 1 dice per rifleman, so they got a fair hefty chunk of dice coming back. They hit a lot, and the effect was 1 dead American there, as you can see, and 4 points of shock altogether against elite Americans in light cover. So you know, not too shabby. The Americans decided to distribute it 3 points on the rifle squad and 1 point of shock on the machine gun team. It's just the details really. Yeah, so firefight now involving on the board now between these two as the Germans continue their creep around, and it'll go back to the it'll go back to the Americans now, because the Germans don't really want to use their last number 2 there, their last 2 die activation command die, shall I say. They could only really use that at this point to bring on their last squad of the 3, and again they don't want to tip their hand as to where all their troops are. They may need to reinforce this attack here, or they may wish to start an alternate push to stretch the Americans round over here, but attacking across open terrain is really dangerous when, since they know the Americans haven't revealed all of their whereabouts yet as well. So they're going to leave the 2 for now. If that had been a 1, they could have just activated the mortar team or something else, but it was not to be. They can't activate the 1. If you don't roll a 1, you can't use it, which is why individual teams are kind of difficult to command at times, which is why you need to bring your senior leaders on to use their command initiatives to activate them. Blah blah blah, detailed rules. We're going to carry on now, back to the Americans. A mixed blessing for the Americans. The 2 6s means they will be activating next, which is a lovely safety blanket to have, but the rest of the dice weren't particularly useful. The 5 means they've got now 4 chain of command points, which is lovely for them. They got 2 and 2 3s basically, so 2 junior leaders and a full section or squad. They used this 3 over here to activate the squad in the middle. Well, the junior leader, he used his first command initiative point to remove one of the points of shock they'd accrued, and then he used the second one to activate his entire squad to open fire on the Germans in front of them. Right, so a whole barrage of fire went back the Germans' way, and despite being on tactical, they did take some damage. I'll just come around and show you. It boiled down to 1 extra point of shock and 2 casualties, so yeah, I'll be picking them up, and they both managed to take them off the rifle team. There is a slight risk to your the junior leaders or any attached leaders to a given unit that takes damage. It hasn't happened yet though. I'll let you know when it does. So yeah, but it didn't happen this time, so the German junior leader is alive and unwounded in there. But yes, so the remaining 2 dice for the Americans, they're not actually going to use, again for reasons of not wanting to reveal where their troops are yet. They want to see where the Germans are going to be attacking first. If they reveal it too soon, then they don't need to yet. This squad here isn't too badly beaten up to need reinforcing or anything. What they could have done with is a 1 or something, which they could have used to activate the anti-tank team here, or if they'd had dice that added up to 4 remaining, they could have used the senior commander here to activate this team instead, but unfortunately it was not to be. They rolled a 2 and a 3, which they can't use to add up to 4, and they can't activate a team because they don't have a 1, but they are going to go again next, so let's do that. Yeah, American second roll in a row there, so the 6 does nothing, so they won't be going again. The 5 now means that they also have 5 points of chain of command on their dice. Right, the 2 4s there, they're not using both of them because they don't want to bring their other senior leader on, so that one goes, but they used the other one quite early on, and what they did was he activated the nearby anti-tank team to shoot, and they certainly did. Because they hit the last time they aimed at the Stug, they actually get a +1 to hit, so they're hitting on 6s this time as opposed to 7s, which is nice. They did manage to hit, but this time it just bounced, it really did clang off the armor. It didn't actually have any extra effect, so damn for them, unfortunately. The Stug actually rolled really well on its armor, so yeah, didn't happen this time, but they've got 1 more round left before they have to withdraw and rearm. They can do that. They get 3 rounds, and then if they have to back up to a jump off point somewhere to get some more rounds, but we'll see how that works out for them. Maybe they will be dead by then, who knows. They might wake up dead tomorrow. But no, next thing was so that's sorry, actually no, the remaining points of command initiative this guy gets. Senior leaders get 3 command initiatives. He removed 2 of the shock off of this infantry squad here. Next up, the 2 was used to activate this squad to open fire on the Germans in the woods again, to really pour it on, but this time, due to the heavy cover, it really did factor in quite a lot. Only 1 point of shock was allocated to the Germans this time, so although they were accruing shock and they'd taken some damage, they're still in fighting shape back there, thanks to going tactical actually, so it was a good choice of mine. Finally, the 1 was used to operate this mortar. Incidentally, the 1 couldn't be used to use the anti-tank crew team again. It can only activate once per set of command dice, of course, just establish that. The 1 though was used to activate this mortar team at the back, who then just shot at this squad again and did absolutely nothing, unfortunately. Firing out of sight is always a little bit tricky in all rules really for mortars, but was not to be for them this time. Okay, that concludes the Americans. We're going to go back to the Germans. Pretty tasty roll there for the Germans. That last 5 puts them on gives them a whole chain of command point. Now you can use these chain of command points for various things, like I said before. They're not going to use it yet. One of the things you can use it for, incidentally, is to end the current turn, because remember, all this time we've been still in turn 1 despite multiple activations on both sides. Ending a turn does various things. For a start, it removes all the overwatch and all the tactical markers, so from the board, but which would actually negatively affect the Germans, so they're not going to be doing that. It would also mean that units which are currently routing are picked up off the board, and units which are currently pinned down or have been rallied can actually get back into the fight and stuff like that. That's a general overview. I'm not going to go into it so far, but the Germans aren't going to be doing that, not yet. No, they're going to hold that back, but they have it for future. But these last few dice also quite useful. First of all, the 1 was used here, and they used it in the vehicle, which can activate now. The commander basically tapped the gunner on the head and says, "Oi, shoot them," and so he added his firepower in against his established target, which is the infantry squad. Since they're here to support their own infantry, they thought they needed to, so they lobbed some more HE into the Americans over here. Actually did quite well this time. They managed to sight in better, hit with 3 dice and managed to cause a singular kill and 2 more points of shock on the Americans. So I'll pick him up now. With the next with the 2 out of that little batch there, they activated this squad here in the woods to open fire, did a whole bunch more shock on the Americans. So the Americans starting to accrue a lot of shock there, which will adversely affect their return fire, but it also brings them a little bit closer to being pinned and stuff, and that's when things start getting really annoying for people, is when your squads start going pinned. You really do lose a lot of their effectiveness, of course, as you expect they would, the remaining 1 was used to activate this little mortar here, which opened fire on the anti-tank team and did absolutely nothing. I guess having to re-sight didn't help their aim any, and the remaining 2 from the pile actually activated this the squad which was over here. Actually got a pretty tasty movement roll and managed to zip all the way around the back of this building. So they are really starting to sweep around a little bit. They're quite far away from the objective still, but I mean, you can't take the direct route necessarily all the time. So they're hoping maybe to force the hand of the Americans to actually deploy a bit more onto the board, so as the battle can develop further. Right, that's the Germans do not get another turn, so do not get another activation, should I say. We're going to move on to the Americans now. Another not particularly helpful command roll for the Americans. The 5 did give them a chain of command point, which they did really want. The 4 was used to activate this senior leader in the middle again. He first of all, of course, ordered the anti-tank team to open fire on the Stug, and this time they missed, just straight up missed. Obviously the panic is starting to set in, so they're out of rounds. They need to now move back to rearm, which is annoying. Okay, he then used his remaining 2 command initiative points to take 2 points of shock off of the squad next to him. He next up, we used one of this 2 here to activate the squad as a whole. Not the junior leader with them, unfortunately. This has to be the squad, so no more command initiatives could be used to take off shock or anything. They opened fire, of course, in this firefight and just did 1 point of shock. The firefight and the attritional nature of it has actually affected their shooting, and they are starting to suffer for it. It was some pretty bad rolls as well, to be fair, against units who'd gone tactical in light cover. So it wasn't likely to be. It was difficult for them at the end of the day, and didn't actually result in much. So 1 point of shock. The remaining set of 2s again can only activate whole squads, and they didn't. And they really are resisting putting on their second squad, because that would be a major commitment at this stage. Whilst the Germans are starting to move up, but they're hoping that there's still a little bit of turns grace before they can have to deploy something to counter that and stretch their forces out. So those 3 2s there, not used. Oh, and I forgot to mention, once they got the chain of command point, the Americans then used it, so their dice is now gone, to end the turn, which basically you check lots of things, so things like ongoing barrages finish, there weren't any, smoke which has been deployed, it gets picked up and stuff. What I actually wanted to do is the tactical marker that these Germans has been disappeared now, so those Germans are no longer considered to be tactical. The Americans know exactly where they are, and they've managed to get a bead on them properly now. So unless the Germans manage to go tactical again in the next in the next phase, then they're going to be a better target altogether. So there we are. Now back to the Germans. The Germans have enjoyed another relatively interesting turn. They rolled over here. The 2 4s, of course, again not doing anything because they still have troops to bring on and they don't want to commit their senior leader yet. The 1 was used to operate the gunner on the Stug again, and the 3 was used to activate the junior leader in control of this squad here to take off a point of shot. Both of them combined their firepower against the Americans in the trees here, against the hedges here, and just have done a whole bunch of shock and another kill, unfortunately, on the beleaguered American squad, which is yes, and also managed to wound the junior leader as well, which was annoying for the Americans. Means he only gets 1 point of command initiative instead of 2 now to do stuff with, which will this is harsh for them. What else? Oh yes, so this American squad has now got 7 points of shock on it altogether and 8 remaining squad members, so they're actually pretty close to going pinned. If the amount of shock I think it's equal to or greater than the number of models left, then they go pinned. I might be right, it might be greater than, I'll check it as and when the time comes, but yeah, so that's bad. The squad which was down here elected to go 3 dice, so you can go 1 dice and go tactical or shoot at half effect, go 2 dice and not shoot at all, or you can go 3 dice and run. And what they did was they decided to run up the board here towards the American jump off point, and if you run you get 1 point of shock on each team in the squad. So there you go. What they did, they rolled an 11, which actually got them to here. If they got within 4 inches of this American jump off point, which they were only just short of, they would have locked it down and then possibly captured it at the end of the turn, but they were just out of it. I didn't actually realise they were that close, and I didn't think of running with them at the time, but they are there now, and that's very dangerous for the Americans, so they'll have to do something about that. It's all about forcing the hand, I suppose. But yes, this German squad very, very exposed at the moment from multiple directions, but I guess the alternative was sitting back here, and if they'd managed to roll well, they'd have got behind this building and taken the jump off point. I like this set of rules because you just don't know exactly where you're going to end up before you roll. You have to declare which direction you're going and then say how fast you're going to try and run, and then roll your dice to see how far you move, and unfortunately they just ended up a little bit short, but hey. Right, we're going to move back to the Americans now. They really have got to start committing more troops to this battle now. Okay, not the greatest command dice there for the Americans again. What a time to roll a bunch of 5s. The singular 6 does nothing. Again, you need to roll at least 2 to get an extra activation. The 3 5s give them 3 points of chain of command, which is not exactly what they needed right now. Not right now, anyway. Right, so the 1 they used to deploy and use their medium machine gun down here on its tripod mount, which gets a whopping 10 dice on its own, plus its crew, open fire at the Germans down there. I don't know, I might regret this. They could have put it next to this jump off point just to intercept the Germans before they got into it, to at least contest them or something, but they they're only a team. They don't activate as a guarantee, and I didn't want them to end up shooting once, maybe not doing enough on a bad roll, and then getting overrun with the jump off point, because they haven't got much meat on their bones. It's just a support team. So they fired though, hoping to like pin down the Germans or crunch them up something. They actually did all right. It's 2 dead Germans and a whole bunch more shock, but not enough to actually stop them. They also wounded the German junior leader, which if they'd killed him, that would have been a great bonus to them, but they just wounded him. It was unfortunate for them. So yeah, if they killed him, he wouldn't be able to activate on a 3, on that squad wouldn't be able to activate on a 3, for example, if you see what I mean. But you know, with command dice and stuff, they'd have to do it on 2s instead. But as it was not to be. He was just wounded. Yeah, so it didn't stop them, but certainly caused them a lot of damage in the open, so might cause the Germans some problems later on. But yeah, unfortunately for them, it didn't stop them, but they are relatively safe, should I say, from German reprisal from that direction at least. I forgot to mention, when this junior leader got wounded, that did actually detract 1 point from the force morale of the Americans. Being elites, they ended up with 10 points of force morale. They're down to 9 now. The wounded junior leader for the Germans actually didn't roll, so let's see. A 1 will mean that's no effect. The Germans didn't like that guy anyway, it turns out, so him being wounded is nothing to them. So yeah, it does not reduce their force morale. Everything that sort of bad that happens to your force can actually, you roll a dice and it can take off 0, 1, maybe 2 or even 3 points of force morale of your total, and that's how you track the overall ability of your platoon to carry on fighting. But yeah, you have to dice for it. So the average dice roll for a junior leader being wounded as opposed to killed is that you lose 1 point. Obviously with rolling a 1 like I just did, the Germans didn't mind so much, so they don't lose any points this time. But yeah, this time, who knows what happens next time. Anyway, what else happened? Oh yes, with the 4, they activated their senior leader again. He ordered the anti-tank team back to the jump-off point. They've now rearmed with the last set of bazooka rounds that they can get. There's no more available to them. That's a bummer for them. Again, you dice for that, and that was the result they got. So yep, no more for them. And he then used his remaining 2 points of command initiative just to take 2 points of shock off of this squad. He could have activated them to like open fire back or something, but they're so close to being pinned and stuff that he wanted to take the shock off, so that they're still there as a block whilst the Americans try and stabilise their line. This dice roll did not help. It wasn't the best time to roll 3 5s. That would have been helpful earlier perhaps, but not now. Okay, back to the Germans. Oh, there you go. The Germans get 2 more 5s towards the second chain of command dice. They still haven't used their first one, but I've got a feeling that's going to change in just a second. They then use one of the 3s here to, I'm just going to go around, sorry. They managed to tuck, despite all the shock they'd taken, which did reduce their movement, they managed to tuck in behind this building. That does lock down this American jump-off point, which is a bad thing for the Americans, that is. Yes, so yeah, they've managed to get behind cover, having swept around the board, taking a lot of fire at the last moment though, but they dove for cover at the end of it. They got a lot of shock to show for it and a wounded leader, but they've made it. And well, you know, whether or not they'll be taking any more offensive action during the course of the game, I don't know, but they got some time to catch their breath. Right, what was it? Oh yes, the next 3 was used on this squad here. What's happened is their junior leader activated with the 3. He used his first command initiative point to remove one of the 3 points of shock. As you can see, it's gone. And then he ordered his squad to move up and go tactical. So they just stayed put and put the tactical marker back in. So effectively, he's just ordered his squad to rearrange themselves a bit to make better use of cover again. Now the Americans have kind of worked out where everyone is. That's what it kind of represents. Yeah, so they're using the woods to get hard cover again before the Americans shoot. And then the 1 was used on the gunner's position in the tank again to open fire on the Americans in the hedges, and they had a really good round of fire this time. 1 dead American and 4 more points of shock. That is more shock than there is models in the unit, so that unit is pinned, which is that little explosion marker there. So pinned units can't move after, and all their firing is reduced by half after modifiers for the shock they've got. out, so there'll be very little firepower coming off of this squad, but they do count their cover as being one level higher now, so they'll get hard cover from this hedge, from small arms fire at least, rather than just light cover. But yeah, that's annoying, really bad for the Americans. They are stuck there and they are pinned down. Just what you want to do to your opponents when you're attacking a position, to be perfectly honest, because that means he can't move them around. Now the Americans have got a bit of a dilemma. They're being hunted down on multiple fronts, and yeah, they're being forced to commit their troops one way or the other. Right, let's move on. Okay, just before the Americans turn, the Germans did actually use their chain of command point, I forgot to say, to end turn 2. So we're in turn 3 as of now, but that actually picked up the tactical marker they just put down on their squad there, because I didn't think of that. Smart me. But it did, however, pay off for them, because they get to pick up this jump-off point, which was overrun by the squad they just moved up. It's a worthy trade for them as far as they're concerned, because the Americans have now denied the ability to deploy troops on this part of the board, and it also reduced them force morale by a further 2 points, putting the American paras on 7 force morale points instead of down from 10. Not at the point where they have to really be worried yet. It's not going to start affecting their force cohesion or anything like that, but it's all a bit worrying when it starts to happen. So yes, that's that. So then we moved on to the Americans. I'm not going to show you their command role, but basically I'll just show you what actually moved at this point, because you get the point of how the game now progresses. I'll show them in future sometimes, but if they're not handy I won't. What they managed to do, first of all, they've actually brought on a whole bunch of things. They first of all brought on this squad, the second squad of their 2 to over here. They decided they're going to go start hunting down some Jerrys. Basically, they brought them on from the jump-off point, which is the centre of the crossroads. Over here, being elites, they can deploy nicely far away. They then moved the medium machine gun on tactical over this way in case the Germans sneak around the other side of the building. Then went tactical, since they don't actually have a bead at this point in time, and they can't move and shoot a tripod-mounted machine gun, I don't think. So they just went tactical, which gives them, even if they're in the open, they count as being in light cover. So that's pretty useful. And next, oh yes, they had another a 1 to activate a team with, and they activated this mortar to fire down here on the troops out of sight, just to see if they could put some extra shock on them before any close range stuff happens. Missed entirely, completely. Obviously, having to switch all these targets around is not helping their aim at all. That was all they could really do. They got one more extra point of chain of command over there. Oh no, they did activate their senior commander on a 4. Forgot there. What he did was to order the anti-tank team back to their original position to start taking pot shots again, and he took 2 points of shock off of this team, of this squad here. Really trying. They're still pinned, even if they went down to say 0 shock, they'd still be pinned. You check the team status at the end of a turn. So again, turns only end when specific things happen. They'll be pinned until a turn happens and they've got less shock than models. But hey, we'll get to that as and when it happens. Okay, that was the Americans' turn. They're now almost fully deployed. They just have the single last senior leader to put onto the board now. Otherwise, they are now stretched and spent. Right, German activation rolls, there you go. Okay, first of all, the 2 5s give them 4 points of chain of command point, 4 points of the chain of command die, shall I say. Right, next thing they did was to activate use the 2 to bring on their last squad over here. So they'd be bringing them up the far side of the board, I expect. The 4th was then used to bring out their senior leader, this guy, just for some moral support, I guess. He was able to use his command initiatives as he deployed, so he ordered the mortar team to open fire, and they duly missed whatever it was they were shooting at. Oh yeah, they were shooting at the anti-tank team down here. Completely missed. Well done them. And finally, the 3 was used to activate the junior leader inside the stug, which activated and then it took off the point of shock, and then he ordered the gunner to open fire at these guys again, dealing 2 points more shock to them. No actual casualties, they'll be glad to hear. Right, that concludes the Germans. Back to the Americans. Okay, crucially what you want to see there is the double six, which means that the Americans will be going again after this. Right, so fairly interesting turn. First of all, they used the 3 there to activate the junior leader in command of their squad that's just deployed. He moved them up, went tactical, and ordered one of his men to throw a grenade round the corner at the Germans, dealing 2 points of shock to them, which is a good result, honestly. The 1 was then used on this mortar team back here to further add to the misery, putting another point of shock on the Germans. You can't see them all, but they now have 8 points of shock and 8 models. I did check, you need to have more shock than models to go pinned, so they're not pinned, but they are certainly hurting. On 8 points of shock is never a nice thing to have. You'd much rather not have 8 points of shock, trust me. Right, next, moving on, we had the squad on the section. Sorry. The squad activated with a 2, opened fire at the Germans and did nothing. Unfortunately, being pinned is just not useful. The senior commander activated, took 2 points of shock off them, and then ordered the anti-tank team to open fire at the Stug, and again they missed. This Stug is not doing too badly for itself, considering the amount of firepower that's come its way. But yeah, it's doing really well. It's dominating the board as armour should, but at the end of the day, the onus is on the Germans to attack. But now the Americans are going to get another turn because of those 2 6s. Well, there's the American roll, and another bag of nails, really. 3 5s, just what they didn't need again. So, and the Sol 6 doing nothing. With the 3, though, they did activate this squad again, and they stormed around behind into the cover, into the German squad that had just reached this position here. And it was a bloodbath, it really was. The Germans weren't quite pinned, unfortunately, so it did mean that they got quite a lot. Basically, close combat between 2 squads in this game is incredibly brutal. It's almost mutually assured destruction, unless you can really stack it in your favour. The Germans had 8 points of shock, as you know, and yeah, these are American paratroopers who are aggressive troops, which there was lots of dice basically on both sides. You get 1 dice per man, and then you add on a whole bunch of modifiers, such as for every submachine gun in the squad you get 2 extra dice. If you're elite and your opponent isn't, is lower grade, then you get like 2 extra dice. The Germans got extra dice for having a light machine gun, and obviously other things like that, and yeah, you take off the shock as well. So there's a whole pool of dice which adds and subtracts, but basically both sides still had quite a few dice in their pools. You roll them all, and then every 5 or 6 kills an opponent, and every 6 causes a point of shock as well as killing an opponent. So yeah, there you go. The Americans, for their part, from a full squad, lost 5 men. The Germans were wiped out, barring this guy, who has run away with lots and lots of shock on him. So he is broken, because obviously there is more than twice as much shock on him than there is actually models left. So he has broken and run away. He'll be going back. If a turn ends, he'll just be picked up if he's still broken, and he's not coming back, trust me. But yes, all these guys are dead. The Germans then had to roll a succession of force morale rolls, because lots of things had happened to them. For example, a section got broken, a team got wiped out, their leader got killed. Incidentally, the American leader, the junior leader, lost 5 men, but he wasn't one of them, so he was unscathed as a result of that. That was a surprise. Well done him. He'll get medals, I suppose, and a lot of letters to write, maybe. But yes, lots of Germans were killed or captured, I guess, and that's that. So yes, but the Germans, having taken all their force morale rolls, they're down to 5 points of force morale from their starting 9. They lost nearly half of theirs just from this one brutal combat. Just show, yeah, it's a decisive thing. It's a close combat in this game. The Germans are still able to act as a whole. There's still force cohesion is still completely intact at 5 points of force morale left. As soon as they take 1 more point off, though, for any reason at all, they start to lose command dice. Things like that start to happen, and that's basically when you start thinking about having to throw in the towel. So yes, the Germans have gone from being a fairly comfortable, slow crushing position on the Americans to have this counterattack having really surged and forced them back. But this is the second American squad. They don't have any more reinforcements to call on, really, and they've just taken a bit of a hammering themselves. So will it be too much for them to bear? We'll just have to keep playing and find out. Well, just as you thought it was, swinging one way and then the other, now it's swung back potentially the other way towards the Germans again. I don't know. Here's their command roll. The 6 does nothing, as we all know. Right, first of all, the 3 was used to activate the junior... No, actually, no. Yes, the 6 was used to activate the junior leader inside the Stug here, who straightened up and then opened fire at the medium machine gun that the Americans had deployed, tried to change his target, and wow, he must have hit something explosive nearby, because he managed to kill 4 out of the 5 models in that team, which is outstanding dice rolls. Basically, is all it is. There's nothing. I can't claim any particular thing apart from luck. Yes, and so it was 4 dead and 1 point of shock, which, well, funny enough, wasn't enough to do anything to the remaining guy. He was just down to 1 man, because you need to exceed to pin. So 1 point of shock on 1 guy wasn't enough. But yes, that was ruinous enough as it is. Then the 4 was used there by the senior leader to activate, first of all, the mortar team, which opened fire on said, on the previously mentioned medium machine gun, causing 1 point of shock and breaking them. So that broke the team there, and they've had to move back into cover with 2 points of shock, which is double the number of models they've got. That caused another point of force morale to go down on the Americans, so they're down to 6. Germans are on 5, the Americans are on 6. This is getting close, getting down to the wire. The German senior officer then used his remaining 2 points of command initiative. Well, first of all, he moved up the squad, which was next to him, as their activation for the turn. 2 dice just to move forwards. It's amazing how bold you can be when you know all the Americans are pointing that way. And then he used the last point of command initiative to move himself up behind them. He's still within 9 inches, which is command range for him, of this mortar, but he's also able to give support to the unit in front. So pretty good turn for them. The remaining 2 dice there were added together to equal 3, as I'm sure you can work out. To use this unit, their junior leader took 1 point of shock off and then ordered them to fire, putting 2 more points of shock on the American squad in the middle, just keeping the pressure up on them, making sure they can't rally, keeping them pinned, holding them in place. Wow. So yes, it's a tough one to call at this point. Both sides obviously feel they've got something in it for them, but yeah, well, we're going to carry on and see what happens. Okay, here's the American command roll. The 6 does nothing. The 5 gives them a whole chain of command dice to use as they will. The 4 was used to first of all take a couple of points off shock again, and then order the anti-tank team to fire. They did. They opened fire, they hit, they scored, and they knocked the main gun out on the Stug, which actually renders it effectively a paperweight, because this Stug, as far as I remember, does not have a coaxial or otherwise machine gun on it. It's just a portable assault gun. So yeah, it's effectively done for the game. It's had a good innings, but yes, it's not. It's its main gun. It also takes. Oh, forgot. I believe it also takes 2 points of shock as well, for the purposes of, well, whatever that means. It's really a bit academic now. It would affect its accuracy and its ability to move, but well, it's out now. But yes, so they've obviously knocked out its main gun. Well done them. They finally achieved something, and yeah, that they could have done that if they'd had that in the first turn. That would have been a different game, I'm sure. But yeah, never mind. Right, so that was him done. This 1 and 2 were added together to get this junior leader to activate on a 3. He took 1 of the points accrued shock out and then moved his squad back up. He's looking to establish some sort of defense of the actual objective at some point. He needs to get his battered squad back into circulation. And finally, the last 1 was used to likewise move this mortar team, but they rolled a double 1 on their movement, which sucks for them, as they just means they go a little bit up the board, but so a bit of a waste, that one. Okay, yes, both sides are going to be scrambling to try and rescue their respective situations. Well, okay, that was a bit of a nasty one. Okay, the Germans rolled, and this is their command dice. The 6 does nothing. The 5 gives them another point on their chain of command dice. 3-3-1 is what you got to look at. Right, so first of all, they used 1 of the 3s on this squad here, and they just opened fire and let rip on the anti-tank team, which was in the corner here. 1 guy died, a bunch of shock went on, he broke, and caused 2 points of force morale. Unfortunately for the Americans, and very fortunately for the Germans, to come off of the American total, putting them down to 4 points of force morale. They'll now be losing command dice each turn as they so we have 5 instead of 6 to activate with, which was pretty nasty, and they lost their anti-tank team. The other 3 was used over there to open fire and use a grenade on these troops in the hedgerows, killing 2 more. Didn't cause any more shock, but did kill 2 more. So this squad is very battered now, very battered now. And the one was used to engage the driver to just back up down the hill, just to get him out of harm's way. I know the anti-tank team had gone, but really it seemed like the sort of thing the tank commander would do. The front of his tank must look a little bit pockmarked at the moment anyway, so I think he needs to thought he needs to go and get it back in the shop, get that main gun replaced if nothing else. Right, so yes, that's that. I'm actually going to call it there. The Americans are the first to dip below the major threshold for their force morale, so they could potentially tough it out and possibly even win. I mean, the Germans are teetering on the brink themselves from being unable to attack, but I mean, they're gonna, once they start losing force morale points, as soon as another turn end is called, this team will rout off the table, and that will be another morale check they have to make. And that's not great. They've got a whole squad of Germans advancing this way with just a mortar team to stop them. I mean, this squad is a bit beaten up itself. Could it, potentially? I just don't know. I just don't think that this is a very realistic situation for the Americans to hold on when they could potentially fall back to another position. I'm just saying that, really. The Germans certainly aren't going to be in much of a position to capitalise on this advance that they've made. I think they'd eventually take the crossroads. I think it's just that they've lost an entire squad out of their platoon. Their supporting armour has had to withdraw for repairs. Major repairs probably, and they've lost a lot of men and probably got quite a few wounded as well. So it's probably they take the thing, they'd report back, but I don't think they'd be in much of a position to exploit. And so it's kind of like a German winning but draw kind of situation overall, I'd say. Both sides have blooded each other quite horrifically, and yes, the Americans could easily just fall back with their troops and set up another perimeter just a little bit further back probably. And that's that really. I really enjoyed this. It's been good to get back into it. If I've made any glaring rules errors, I am very sorry. I haven't played this game for quite a while. I remembered the basics. It's a really easy game to pick up and play. I mean, I know bolt action seems to be like rule supreme when people talk about World War II in 28mm scale, but this is the best game for this particular scale and level of organisation, where you have a platoon on each side with maybe one piece of armour each side or something like that, over strength platoons or even under strength platoons, as I like to play. That's my favourite scale for World War II. My level of action I like to have on the board. I just quite like the tactics involved, the moving the squads around and everything, the interaction and stuff like that. Anything more than that, say you go up to company level or something like that, I just find it gets a little bit too crowded for my tastes, and that's just personal taste. Lots of people love playing that sort of thing. Just for me personally, this is my kind of thing. Right, well, I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope that you maybe even, if you're thinking about doing World War II, Chain of Command is a great one to do. I was just about to say bolt action sort of rules the roost as regards this scale, but if you've got a bolt action army, you can play Chain of Command without doubt. I mean, it's just a book. You need to buy this book, incidentally, and you should, because it's really great fun. And it does things that bolt action can't. I'm not saying it's like definitively better, because that's all personal preference, but for me it's definitely the go-to set of World War II rules for this particular level of action. I think I said that. But I hope you liked the game. I really enjoyed getting my models out and pushing them around the board again. The sound of rolling dice. That was great. Okay, well, my name's ShieldWar100. It's not my real name, but, it's my screen name. YouTube says you've got to have something completely different from everyone else, so that was the only one I could think of at the time. But, if you enjoyed this, please check out the rest of my channel. It's mostly Batman, certainly at this point, and it probably will be forever. I hope you enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed playing, and hope that you enjoy some of my other videos. Take care. Goodbye.